Hi, everybody. First, I want to see how many of you are actually gamers out there. Raise your hands. Raise them high. All right. Well, those of you who aren't gamers, I hear there's another lecture across the hall called Agricultural Intensification. You might want to check that one out. There we go. Just let you see for a second the little information about my Games for Change. So games have always been vilified by parents, politicians, educators, and community groups like this one. On the other hand, there's recently been some talk about games really bringing out our best behaviors. So what a lot of people don't understand is that games are just a medium. They are neither inherently good or bad. We don't get rid of metals simply because they make guns. We don't lose and prohibit alcohol because some people abuse it. Games can be degrading and sexist. They can incite violence in unstable people, like other media. They can also be incredibly inspiring and moving and even transcendent. Games can change your hearts and change your mind about important issues, and they can change your life. They did mine. I'm going to talk to you today about this idea of games are growing up. It's a hard time. We have a hard time letting go of our preconceptions about things. And the word game sometimes sounds trivial, even evanescent. Games are a young medium. They're really only 40 years old. And we have a climate of distrust around early successes. Never trust a media that's less than 30 years old. First, I just want to say happy birthday to Pong. Pong's 40 years old this year. And now I'm going to tell you my story. So when I was a kid, I was really interested in what I thought of as meaningful popular culture. I liked the works. I liked MASH, I liked Bob Dylan, and this was my favorite film, Walkabout. It was about race and life and loss and spirituality. Of course, I watched all those other shows, too, that my parents thought were wasting my time. But did my parents know about the biodiesel veggie bus and the Partridge Family? So after I graduated college, I wanted to get involved making meaningful media. I went to PBS, of course. There were a lot of other people there like me who were interested in helping the world, and they were idealistic, and they, of course, like me, didn't have much fashion sense. And there was an editor there who gave me a diskette, a game. I thought, a game? I don't play games. I like meaningful media. Too busy for playing games. I have crossword puzzles to solve and California grapes to boycott. So I put it in my pocket and I forgot all about it. I went to a party that weekend friends were throwing. And I was getting dressed for the party and I found it. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll just play it. 6 hours later, I hadn't gotten up from my seat. Needless to say, I wasn't invited to those friends anymore. Hidden Agenda was a game about the complex issues raging at the time of American involvement in Nicaragua. I had never seen anything like it before. It was incredibly fun to play and also about something that mattered. I was hooked and inspired, and I wanted to find more of these games. So I went to the Game Developers Conference. This is where all the 20,000 mostly white guys, congregate every year, game designers. And I was looking for my poncho-wearing, Birkenstock-clad gamers and earth tones. I wanted to find who made these games and where I could find more of them. Excuse me, I'd come up to these big guys. Excuse me, can you tell me where the Nicaraguan games are found? So, needless to say, I did not win the popularity contest, nor did I find the games. I did find a bunch of interesting things, though. Games fail financially, they estimate, 80% of the time. Games are really, really hard to make. And the game industry really wasn't interested in these new kinds of games. They just wanted to do more of what they were good at. I also found something that I really found exciting. There were no lines at all at the ladies' room. And I thought, this is a field I could stay in for a while. And most importantly, I learned that games are a young medium. And, like their brethren, are often misunderstood. Take a look. the written word. Plato thought the written word was making us incapable of real judgment. Voltaire thought books were going to make us ignorant. Film, of course, is robbing our children of all creative ability and initiative and the ability to think for themselves. Who knew? TV, well, maybe they got that one right on the TV. So, early media often does embody very basic human themes. Here is the very first feature film called The Kelly Gang. It looks a lot like, check it out, I'm going to show you a little bit of it right now. It looks a lot like a game called Battlefield. All right, well, maybe it looks like a beta of Battlefield. Here's the very first TV show. Sorry, can't show you the early internet. I'm sure you can guess. So what I can tell you, though, is that a lot of things that might surprise you. Lots and lots of people are playing games. Lots of women, lots of people over 50. It's not kids in basements anymore. Games are growing up. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show you some of the early indicators of games growing up. It's really a medium coming into its own. Here's how. Games are being collected in museums as cultural artifacts for the first time. There have been game exhibits at the MoMA and the Whitney. There are game museums in Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin. There's a gigantic blockbuster game exhibit happening this year, this week, as a matter of fact, at the Smithsonian. Games are also being treated differently in academia. Up till now, games have really been studied for under production and game design and coding. But for the first time, we're really seeing programs like at NYU and at USC of games being studied as meaningful cultural objects. And NYU, for example, this comes from the NYU Game Center, sits alongside the NYU Film Program and the Creative Writing Program. And for the academics in the audience, I haven't forgotten about you. In case you haven't been able to follow along, here's the title of my talk translated. Games as complex cultural and aesthetic objects. So, back to my story for a little bit. When I left the Game Developers Conference in 1996, I really wanted to find more of these games, so I kept a list. There were not very many out there. They were mostly found in the art world. And I curated a show, and I kept going back and back to the Game Developers Conference. And finally, in 2003, I found some other people that were making or interested in these kinds of games. I found them, of course, by their footwear. And in 2004, we started something called Games for Change. It was a nonprofit dedicated to empowering and encouraging making these new kinds of games about serious social issues. In 2008, this was our keynote. Games for Change in 2008 was the biggest game event in New York City. This year, this week actually, the first Game Developers Conference hosted a Games for Change Day. Very exciting. Sandra Day O'Connor, you're probably scratching your head, why wouldn't she make a game? She learned that elementary students could identify an American Idol judge faster than they could a Supreme Court justice, and she got concerned. She thought she would make something on their own turf. So she has built, when her team, with some incredible educators, iCivics, which is a suite of games about civics. Nicholas Kristof, Al Gore, other keynote speakers are also making games. Al Gore last year said, games are the new normal, and he's right. Let's look at some of these games for change.
Video games are often accused of wasting time or even promoting violence, but there are some popular new games that have a pretty lofty goal, saving the world. Here's ABC's Andrea Canning.
Please. I'm your officer in charge for this World Food Program mission. Our job is to do an aerial assessment to get an accurate picture of the food crisis.
Your mission in the new video game Food Force? To save millions from starvation in the war-ravaged nation of Ceylon.
You can see there will be no harvest this year.
Ceylon may be fictitious, but its problems aren't. The video game has been downloaded 4 million times, and it's one of dozens of socially responsible games bringing issues like the environment and the Darfur crisis to your fingertips. Getting involved is part of the game.
Survival of the camp is also assisted by you spreading the word about the game and about Darfur.
Think of the concept as the opposite of the ultra-popular and ultra-violent Grand Theft Auto.
We think games have the potential to have a positive and powerful impact on society. Games are really good for exploring complex social issues.
And there's no issue more complex than the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So former Israeli intelligence officer Ossi Borak created Peacemaker. Gamers can attempt to achieve Mideast peace by playing as the Israeli Prime Minister.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? So research is confirming that games can do a lot of stuff, certainly around games and learning. Here are just a few of the ways that games are great for learning. Like other mature media, games have become ubiquitous and woven into the fabric of our daily lives. How often have you all spent an entire evening creating an idealized Sims family where the teenagers empty the dishwasher and pick their clothes up off the floor? Oh, maybe that's just me. So nowhere is it more apparent that games are growing up than in the indie game movement. This is where a lot of people outside the game industry are building some of the most original and provocative games there are today. Let's take a look at some of them. This is a game called Limbo. It's unlike any game you've seen before. The creator had a singular vision and created this game that was both eerie and haunting. It had striking grayscale features, and you can see, and it has very minimal sound, and it's influenced by film noir. It got some of the very best awards, and up against commercially backed projects. And it was originally funded, unbelievably, by government grants. This is a beautiful game. The game designers wanted to create a feeling for a positive feeling in the player. So Flower is a game where you actually control those petals, and they move through your environment, and they affect the environment. They can turn the grass green, they can make flowers grow, they can turn the windmill on. Let's take a look. Incredible game to play. It just feels like nothing else you've felt in playing games before.
I bet I may as well try and catch the wind.
This is a game called Minecraft, another indie game. It's a sandbox game. That means it's open-ended. Players can create whatever they want, and they can create them first. They have to create the tools that create the buildings. You can't really see it very well right here, but they're little teeny blocks, and every single building is created by these very small blocks. It's very powerful. So the military has also been using a lot of games. This is from an email I was sent by a game developer who's using games, who's making games for the military. These are all the ways the military is using games. Here's one of the most popular military games. It's a first-person shooter. It's their #1 recruiting tool. I hear they actually let gay people now play this game too. Imagine. So the most interesting government change in games is they have a new game expert on staff called the Senior Policy Advisor in Games. She is there to leverage the power of video games to address some of the administration's issues. President Obama has come out of the game closet himself, as it were. He's using games to help promote STEM skill learning. The First Lady as well. She's using a game to help her Healthy Kids campaign, a game contest. There are so many great games that deal with health and body issues. Here's another one. Okay, maybe not so much, but this is a family favorite, and I didn't want to have a talk without including it. I don't want to get up here and lecture about good games versus bad games. We love entertainment games in our house. My daughter is not allowed to watch TV. She's 11, but she is allowed to play video games when she has done her homework. Even entertainment games require something of her that TV never will. Engagement, thinking, problem solving, mental energy. Try finding that on CNN. People think that marrying meaningful content with gameplay is going to ruin the gameplay itself, and Sid Meier proves them wrong. This is a game called Civilization V, and I think it's one of the industry's true masterpieces. Here you meet Napoleon on the battlefield, and you get to, you meet Napoleon on the battlefield, and you get to interact with him and decide how he wants to, what kind of action he's going to take next. This game is about history and diplomacy, military strategy, and economic development. I'm going to leave you here with another screenshot from Civilization V. This is Gandhi, and he is trying to stop a war. And here's where you come in. Games are clearly growing up, and I invite you not to underestimate them. They can teach us and they can inspire us. They can change our hearts and they can change our minds. And sitting right here or watching online is someone who may be remembered 100 or 200 years from now for their early and transformative work in this field. If you're a parent looking to buy games, if you're a student looking to find a new career, or anyone else, I invite each and every one of you to get involved. I believe that games may be the most powerful and positive medium of our time, and that time has come. Thank you very much.